again, everybody. This is going to be our lecture for Chapter 10, which is Emotional and Social Development in Middle Childhood. So we're not going to actually cover all of Chapter 10. We're going to end with these slides on siblings. So we're going to leave off probably around the last 15 slides or so, because they're just less important. You can't test on everything, you can't cover all of the material sometimes because they get behind. So that's what's going on now. So let's talk about emotional and social development in middle childhood. So as usual, we're going to start out with Erikson's views on what's going on in this stage of life. So Erikson says that the conflict that's going on at this point is between the development of industry versus the development of inferiority. And what industry is a sense of being competent, that you can navigate your social environment, that you are competent in the skill set that you have learning in school, basically just a sense of confidence and competence in your abilities. So at this point, there is a shift that you see between, you go from make-believe play to realistic forms of accomplishment. So now, more so, their striving is not going to be so much so invested in imaginary play, but it's going to be invested in realistic accomplishment in the real world. So in industrialized nations, the marker for beginning middle childhood is actually going to school. So entering into the first grade is going to be what marks really, in industrialized nations where people go to school, the entrance into middle childhood. So the school entrance brings a lot of changes for kids. And most of the changes that we're going to see that occur emotionally and socially in kids are going to revolve around being around more people. So at this age, they're going to school, they have classes, they have teachers, they're involved with a lot more people around them. This is a whole different context for them. So really a lot of the changes that we're going to see are going to occur because of how many more people they are around, especially peers. So kids are going to start learning and discovering their own capacities and their own skill level as compared with other children. And they're going to develop a stronger sense of moral commitment to others as they're around more and more people, and also a sense of responsibility and a sense of moral responsibility to others around you. So the negative outcome of this stage is called inferiority. And this is where a child develops a sense of being inferior to others. So it's a sense of inadequacy, being personally inadequate. You don't feel competent enough to handle your daily tasks, or that you can develop a skill set good enough to handle your daily tasks, like learning in school and that sort of thing. This can happen if parents in the home life has not really prepared the child for what life is going to be like in school. So if the kid isn't very well prepared for the school environment, being around all of those people, all of the new things that are going to start happening as a result of being in school. So a sense of inadequacy can develop if a kid isn't really prepared for that. Also, if teachers and peers might destroy a child's feelings of self-confidence. So if the child is being victimized at school, or if teachers are extremely critical, sometimes that can really undermine their senses of well-being. So what we're going to see in Erikson's sense of industry, his positive outcome of the stage is going to be a combination of several things that develop around this point. So a positive but realistic sense of self-esteem, also a pride in realistic accomplishments. So the more accomplishments, more goals you set, and the more that you accomplish, the better off you feel. Also more responsibility and cooperativeness with age mates. So cooperating and sharing and getting along well with others around you in the peer environment. For self-understanding. Self-understanding develops and becomes more sophisticated. Kids become able to describe themselves in terms of more psychological concepts and psychological traits. Also, they can compare their own characteristics to the characteristics of other people. Maybe, for example, how would you know that you are extroverted or that you are a social person if you didn't have any information about how everybody else was? So maybe you're more talkative than normal because you know and can compare yourself to other kids and know that other kids usually don't talk as much as I do. So that's the way that you get that social comparison. All of these things really cause them to start speculating about their own characteristics and the causes of their own strengths and weaknesses. They start transforming their self-understanding. They get a more sophisticated understanding of themselves and their self-concept, and also their self-esteem is going to differentiate as well. Keep in mind that whereas preschoolers in the early childhood phase, they would understand what a psychological trait meant. For example, like being shy, they would understand what shy meant, and that a shy child doesn't like to be around a lot of strangers, but they wouldn't yet use that term to refer to themselves. In middle childhood, they start doing that. They start referring to these psychological traits as being characteristic of themselves. So for the self-concept, self-concept is what you think makes you who you are, everything that is included in your description of yourself. So during the school years in middle childhood, kids start refining their self-concept to be more sophisticated and more complex. They organize their observations of their own behaviors and internal states into more general dispositions. So I remember that if I were you guys. So they reorganize their view of themselves. It becomes more sophisticated. So for example, an 11-year-old, if you ask them to describe themselves, ask a little 11-year-old to tell you who he or she is. The little girl, this is a direct quote from a study that was done of kids in middle childhood. Who are you? So the child says, my name is A, I'm a human being, I'm a girl, I'm truthful, I'm a truthful person, I'm not very pretty, I do so-so at school, I'm a very good cellist, I'm a very good pianist. I am a little bit tall for my age, I like several boys, I like several girls, I'm old-fashioned, I play tennis, I'm a very good swimmer, I try to be helpful. I'm always ready to be friends with anybody. I'm mostly good, but sometimes I lose my temper. I'm not well liked by some girls and boys. I don't know if any boys like me or not. So that's a whole lot of stuff there this little girl mentions as being characteristic of who she is as a person. So if you'll notice some things about this self-description. Kids tend to emphasize at this point more so their competencies over specific behaviors. So they're going to emphasize their competencies, which are more broad and general things, more so than very specific behaviors. So for example, a little girl says, I'm a very good pianist, or I'm a very good cellist, instead of saying, I played this song really well. So emphasizing that overall competency rather than just one specific skill or behavior. At this point, also they can clearly describe their personality as including both positive and negative things. So at this point they start to understand that there can be good and bad things about themselves and also about others. So for example here, she says that she's truthful, but sometimes she loses her temper. So she's accepting of that, she knows that, and she can describe herself in terms of positive as well as negative. So school-age kids are going to start making a lot of social comparisons at this point. So social comparisons are judgments of their appearance, their abilities, and behavior in relation to other people. Just how good are you at something versus how good everyone else is at it. Just how talkative are you, or how shy are you, or how good are you at kickball, or all different sorts of things. Can be emphasized here. They start really looking at how they stack up to other people in terms of different traits and abilities. So 4 to 6 year olds, so the early childhood, the preschoolers, they can only compare their performance to maybe one person at a time. So they can only look at how am I in this ability versus how well little Johnny is. They can't really make a big, broad social comparison yet because they're very dominated by specific instances and situations. Excuse me. Older kids in middle childhood, they can compare themselves to multiple individuals and also compare multiple individuals to each other. So they might know that this group of kids is more friendly than this group of kids, and that I am just as friendly as this other group of people. So they're going to be able to make multiple comparisons at the same time between many more people than just two. Revisions in self-concept, what causes these things to happen? Well, children are cognitively developing a whole lot at this point, and you're going to see changes in the structure of the self. So changes in how their beliefs about themselves are structured. So kids are now able to coordinate several aspects of a situation when reasoning about the physical world. So that reasoning can also be applied to the social world. So for example, we saw in the cognitive chapter for middle childhood, kids can now understand these conservation tasks. They can now understand that pouring a glass of water into a different shaped container doesn't change how much of that liquid is there. So now they can account for multiple parts of a situation at a time, and that also is going to affect how they reason about social situations. So being able to understand multiple parts of a conservation task at a time is similar to understanding multiple parts of a social situation. So in the social realm, they're going to combine their typical experiences and their behaviors into psychological dispositions, knowing things like, I generally tend to not feel so good when I'm around a lot of strangers. I don't really feel comfortable when I'm the center of everyone's attention. They're going to start combining those similar experiences and behaviors into maybe an understanding that I'm a shy person or an introverted person. So they're going to be able to understand those characteristics about themselves as well as those typical characteristics about peers and other people. So another influence that occurs is on the content of the self, and this occurs because of feedback from others. So I said this once before, and I'll say it again. As you get older into adolescence and into early adulthood even, the way that you feel is going to be more and more and more so determined and affected by feedback from other people in the social realm. George Mead was a sociologist who basically proposed that a well-organized psychological self emerges when the child kind of adopts a view of themselves that resembles the attitudes that other people have toward that child. Knowing that I am an extroverted person because everybody puts me in social situations all the time, or knowing that I'm a talkative person because other people treat me that way, or knowing that and on the negative side, it could be knowing that I'm not a very good kid, or I'm not a very liked person because everybody always ignores me. So here, what he's saying is happening is kids are adopting a view of themselves that is basically going to resemble the way they feel other people view them. Contributing to this pretty strongly is perspective-taking skills, especially when kids try to figure out what other people are thinking, especially what they're thinking about them. This is very crucial for development. Perspective-taking skills and imagining how someone else is thinking and feeling and viewing a situation is going to be a very key part of a lot of different changes that go on here for kids. So when they start internalizing other people's expectations of them, children start to form this idea of an ideal self. So the ideal self is basically who they want to be ideally, the version of themselves that is ideal, the perfect child that they could be. They get that through internalizing other people's expectations of them. So when they get those expectations internalized, they say, okay, ideally this is who I should be. And they use that ideal version of themselves to evaluate their real self, or how they actually are. So for example, if my mom really wants me to make good grades in school, and I get the information, I know that ideally I should be a straight A student. Get spelling test back and they make a B on it. So they're going to evaluate the real self of making that B by knowing that that's not exactly the ideal that I want to get to. I want to be a straight A student. So there you have it. That's how they're evaluating ideal self versus real self. As kids move increasingly towards adolescence and get older, their self-concept is going to be increasingly invested in feedback from close friends. So close friends are really going to be a source of personal information for kids. The content of the self-concept also varies between cultures, so specifically between collectivistic and individualistic cultures. So research has shown us that in the self-concepts and the self-descriptions that kids give, U.S. kids or individualistic nation kids, they list more personal attributes like I'm smart, I'm funny, I'm a good reader, I'm a cellist, that kind of thing. Whereas Chinese children, they tend to list more things that involve group memberships and relationships to other people. So, for example, they might say, I attend this elementary school, I am so-and-so's daughter, I am part of this classroom, I am in this band group, in the little band section at school, that kind of stuff. They're going to be more likely to list relationships with others than they are going to be to say personal things about themselves. So, development of self-esteem. So if you remember, when we talked about self-esteem in the preschool years, so the early childhood years in preschool, they tend to have an overly high sense of self-esteem because they can't really discriminate how good they really are at something versus how good they want to be at something. So this is the example of a little boy who really likes baseball, and because he really likes baseball and really wants to be a good baseball player, he will tell everyone that he is just a phenomenal baseball player. He'll hit a home run every time and pitch 90 miles an hour, even if he's never actually played a game of baseball. Preschoolers have that overly high sense of self-esteem, but as kids enter middle childhood and they get into school, elementary school years, and they're around a lot of other peers, they can't really overestimate their own competencies anymore because they now have a lot of other people to evaluate themselves with. So they can start receiving a lot more feedback about how good they actually are at things versus how good they want to be at things. So what you're going to see is that through this feedback from teachers and especially peers, their self-esteem is actually going to hit a more realistic level, and it's also going to adjust itself to actually differentiate into more categories. So by ages 6 and 7, kids have at least 4 broad categories for self-esteem. So self-esteem in 4 broad regions of the self. So typically they have an academic sense of self-esteem, how good they are at school. They have a social self-esteem, how well liked am I by others, how do I evaluate my social skills, am I good at interacting with others. Next, physical and athletic competence, so how big and strong am I, how good at kickball am I, how good am I at climbing the monkey bars, that kind of thing. And then fourth is physical appearance, so how attractive do I think I am, or how pretty or handsome do I think I am versus everyone else. Within each category, you have more specific subcategories. So, for example, in academic self-esteem, you might have this broad academic sense of self-esteem, but then underneath it, you would have how good I do in literacy, how good I am at reading, how good I am at math and science. So all of those would be blended into an academic sense of self-esteem. And then academic sense of self-esteem would be blended with physical appearance, social skills, and all the other ones into an overall global feeling of self-worth. So it takes on a hierarchical structure at this point. When kids start viewing themselves in terms of stable dispositions, so those enduring traits that they have, they're more likely to combine these self-images into that global sense of self-esteem. So they're going to blend everything together, average it all out to their global sense of self-worth. So self-esteem, like I said, takes on a hierarchical structure at this point. Something that is noteworthy here that I find to be sort of disturbing, but it is true, is that perceived physical appearance, or how attractive they think they are, correlates more strongly with overall self-esteem than any other factor. More than any other factor, including how good they are at school, their academic sense of self-esteem, social skills, physical competence. Physical appearance is apparently the most strongly weighted factor in self-esteem. An emphasis on appearance, especially in portrayals in the media and in society, has had a major implication for the well-being of young kids. Even as early as 1st and 2nd grade, this is really having a strong influence there. So it's very important to recognize this. So this is just an example of the hierarchy of self-esteem. So you've got your general self-esteem up here at the top. You've got your subcategories: academic competence, social competence, athletic, and physical. And then over there you've got physical appearance. Within each category you can have different subdivisions. So friendship with peers, relationships with parents blend into the social competence, which then blend with all of these into the global sense of self-worth. So this is what I mean by a hierarchy of self-esteem. Changes in the level of self-esteem. So what we're going to see is that self-esteem is going to actually decrease, and it's going to adjust to a more realistic level through the elementary school years. So self-esteem declines during the first few years of elementary school because kids are now able to evaluate themselves in terms of how good they actually are at certain things rather than how good they think they are or want to be. So for example, if little Johnny really wants to be a baseball player, really loves baseball and says that he is just an A-star #1 baseball player, maybe when he gets into middle childhood, he's actually old enough to be put on a t-ball team or a little league team. And he realizes that he's not as good at baseball as he thought he was. So he does not hit a home run every time he swings the bat. He cannot pitch 90 miles an hour, and maybe some kids are even better at it than he is. So what you're going to see is that that self-esteem is going to drop, and it's going to adjust itself to reflect the real world, the way things are in reality. So typically, this drop in self-esteem is not going to be harmful. It's not going to be harmful to the kids. It's just really going to adjust to a more realistic reflection of their actual skill set and abilities. Most, but not all kids are going to start really praising their characteristics realistically, but maintain a positive attitude toward themselves. Okay, maybe I'm not a fantastic all-star baseball player, but that's okay. They're going to be more realistic in their feelings of self-worth than they were in preschool. So then from 4th grade on, they actually start feeling more better about themselves. Self-esteem is going to generally rise on average because they're going to start feeling especially competent at school. So if by 4th grade, this is their 4th year in elementary school, so they've kind of got down pat the way that this environment works. So typically, it's going to readjust itself, and it's going to be a little bit higher the more they are at school. So there are several influences on self-esteem that we're going to talk about. So from middle childhood on, individual differences in self-esteem are going to become more stable. So how you feel about yourself is typically going to become more stable the older you get. So there are positive relationships that kind of emerge here between self-esteem and success at valued activities. So what I mean by that is that if you value something in your life or a specific activity and you're doing well at that, you're going to see a pretty strong relationship of self-esteem and doing well at that thing. So for example, academic self-esteem. If you have a high sense of academic self-esteem and you're doing well at school, you feel pretty good about it, then that's going to predict how important and useful you feel school is, also how enjoyable you find school to be, and it's going to predict also their willingness to try harder on difficult tasks at school and learning new things. So kids with a high sense of social self-esteem, they typically tend to be consistently better liked than other peers. So if they have a high sense of social self-esteem, they feel that they can navigate their social environment pretty competently, they actually tend to be better liked and more sociable than other kids. Next, a sense of athletic competence, so feeling that you're pretty good and strong athlete, that kind of thing is going to be positively associated with their performance and investment of time in sports. So if you have a high sense of athletic self-esteem and you think you're doing pretty good at your sport, you're going to invest more time in perfecting your skill set. However, though, if there is a low profile of self-esteem in all areas, that is an issue. As you know, surprise, surprise, that's going to be an issue if they don't have a high sense of self-esteem in any area. If they have a very low profile in all areas, that can lead to a lot of anxiety and depression, and also increasing antisocial behavior throughout the lifespan. So there needs to be some sort of an intervention there. So cultural forces also really have a big impact on self-esteem. A strong emphasis on social comparison is really present in Asian nations. So I'm not saying that this is happening where teachers are comparing kids to each other or that sort of thing. I'm saying that that is ingrained in their culture. They want to do good for their family because it reflects good on their family. They feel a very strong tie to the social environment. So there is a pretty heavy emphasis on social comparison and competition, and that might be one reason why that despite the higher academic achievement of Chinese and Japanese students, what we see is that they have a lower sense of self-esteem than North American children do. In Asian classrooms, competition is pretty high, and also the pressure to achieve very high. to achieve highly is very strong. So at the same time, their culture also values these sense of social self and social harmony. So what you see is that they're not as likely to endorse these things that are part of maybe a more individualistic cultural upbringing. There are also gender stereotype beliefs for self-esteem that kind of play into the effects here. In one study, they found that this is a pretty big study, so you should probably know the results of this. One study found that the more 5 to 8-year-old girls engaged in conversations with their friends about physical appearance, the more they viewed their friends as actually really favoring physical appearance and that being important and also being skinny, and the more they watched TV shows that really had something to do with physical appearance, so things like maybe America's Next Top Model or maybe these makeover shows that go on. They find a woman who kind of doesn't dress very well and they make the whole show about trying to make her look better. The more 5 to 8-year-old girls engaged in that sort of behavior, the lower their sense of self-esteem was, both physically and overall, a year later. The lower their physical sense of self-esteem was, and the lower their overall sense of self-esteem was a year later. This is a very, very big finding. I think that it's very sad that at this point this is really a strong link. In academic self-esteem, in academic self-judgments, girls typically score higher in language self-esteem than boys do, and boys consistently are going to score higher in self-esteem as in math and in science. And this is true regardless of their actual skill level. Regardless of their actual skill level, you might have a group of girls and boys who have the exact same grades in math and in literature, but girls every time are going to say that they feel better about their language arts ability, and boys are going to say that they feel better about their math and science ability. Another thing, African American children, they tend to have slightly higher senses of self-esteem than Caucasian age mates, and that could possibly be because of stronger family ties between African American culture. They tend to have especially warm links to extended family members, which may lead them to feel a little bit a little bit better about themselves than Caucasian children do. Childbearing practices should be a no-brainer. Obviously, these are going to play into how a child feels about themselves. Kids who have parents who use an authoritative parenting style, remember that good, solid, authoritative parenting style that's good, they actually feel typically pretty good about themselves. They have parents who are warm and nurturing and make them feel a lot better about themselves on average. Also, parents who have very firm but appropriate expectations for their children's behavior, they tend to do a little bit better as well. However, kids who have overly controlling parents, the parents who tend to make more decisions for them or play a big role in all of their decision making, you do what I tell you to do and what I want you to do, and you don't get to make up your mind at all. They tend to actually have a lower sense of self-esteem. So apparently, having parents who are repeatedly disapproving, insulting, is linked to a very low sense of self-esteem. The child feels incompetent, they feel a sense of inadequacy about themselves, so they don't feel very good. So children who are subjected to these controlling parenting tactics, they tend to need constant reassurance from other people to know that they are doing well or to know that they're doing a good job for something. They rely heavily on their peers to affirm their beliefs and their own self-worth, which is a risk factor for adjustment problems, because nobody really likes being friends very long with the child who is like, am I doing really good at this? Are you still my friend? Did you like the way that I did this? Is this the way that I should be doing this? And that kind of thing. So that sort of behavior, kids don't like to be involved with other children who act like that very long. So it does lead to peer rejection in the long term. So this is a very important thing. When we see another parenting style, which is the overindulgent parenting style, the My Little Angel parenting style, so to speak, that is really consistently correlated with unrealistically high senses of self-esteem. This can also undermine development. The My Little Angel parents, my child could never do anything wrong. We do everything for them at home. They get whatever they want, no matter what it is. These kids, they tend to have an overly high sense of self-esteem, and when they are challenged, they tend to lash out. When there's a challenge to their overblown ego, this child will probably lash out at others, might become hostile and aggressive, or might throw a temper tantrum and cry a lot. American cultural values have increasingly tried to support self-esteem in kids. So I'll tell you what happened. This is a focus of a lot of my research. Self-esteem around the 1970s to the 1990s, what happened was that parenting books started coming out with "Make your child feel good about themselves regardless." We really need our kids to have a high sense of self-esteem and to feel really, really good about themselves. So that led parenting techniques to kind of swing towards always, telling your child they're good and they're special and they're wonderful and they're good at everything and all this kind of wonderful crap about the kids. There are posters everywhere in elementary schools that say you should feel good about yourself. You are special. You are unique. You are a wonderful, wonderful person. What happened then is that we started really emphasizing you should have a high sense of self-esteem and feel fantastic about yourself regardless of anything else. That actually has led to comparison with previous generations in America. The youth today that have been subject to these sorts of wonderful self-esteem parenting styles and influences from other places, they are achieving less than ever before. They're displaying more antisocial behavior, and also they tend to have other adjustment-related problems. Issues with narcissism. Narcissism has actually risen in the United States considerably over the years since the 70s. Depression and anxiety are also pretty common, because if you think that you are special and you are wonderful and you are great and you're rewarded no matter how hard in childhood, you're rewarded no matter how hard you try, you get whatever you want to, even if you don't do what you're told to do, or even if you don't do well at something, you still receive a reward. That doesn't really train the child for the way the real world is. That really doesn't set them up to understand that sometimes stuff doesn't work out. So what you end up with is a kid or a person who expects everything to go their way and everything to be really gratifying. They expect everyone to recognize how special and wonderful they are, and it really does lead to a lot of adjustment problems, because that sort of a parenting style or influence on self-esteem doesn't really do much for how to deal with everything.